Hi guys. Thanks for sticking around. Uh, Sorry, I don't know if I'm just I don't know what is up with me today. I mean, I've been like stressed out recently, and so maybe it's just it's been wearing, and so I'm not all there. I feel like that wasn't as active a play by play as I usually try to do. There's a lot of just sort of like surface level talking through what I was doing and not much analysis of what was going on. Some of that is, I think, inevitable. Let me just get meta for a second because I love that shit. The the first couple episodes of a new game, there's a ton of stuff to talk about, right? Because we're seeing everything for the first time, and the game is setting up an aesthetic, and it's setting player expectations. It's setting a narrative into motion. It's creating sort of a model for understanding the simulation of the world. It's doing all sorts of things that are exciting. And then typically in a game of, any kind of a length, it settles into a rhythm where it sort of each section, what's the word for waveform? Each period is basically the same as the last one, ratcheted up a little bit. And sometimes the game will introduce entirely new mechanics, like this one. Blinking that's fucking brilliant. I mean, like, let's spend a minute on blinking in just a second, but it's still, like, it's not fundamentally changing the game. It's fundamentally changing some of how you approach the mechanics, but within the context that the game has established. So there's less obvious to talk about from sort of moment to moment once those rhythms have been established, once the game has sort of hit its stride, until it gets to the end. And then, towards the end, a good game, like a good story, will break some of its own rules in order to throw you off. Or it'll try to wrap everything together to a satisfying conclusion narratively and mechanically, and we can sort of talk about where it succeeds and fails at doing that. We can sort of see how some of the threads that are set up early on in the experience pay off or fail to. There's a chunk in the middle that's harder to talk about. It's harder to sort of find things to analyze, at least for me while I'm playing it. I mean, and that's why I really like these Q&A sessions, because we can talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, but it also, I mean, it often gives me a chance to reflect on the stuff that we've just played, because it is juicy. I mean, it is meaty. It's worthy of analysis. I mean, just for a minute, if we want to talk about Blink more, we can talk about Blink more. But Blink is a supremely clever addition to this game, where it is introducing function calls, which is one of the things that we haven't really had. We sort of set up that you can create a block of commands that will execute together. That's one of the first things that we learned, was how to string things together with semicolons. But we didn't have the power to sort of call those function blocks at will, or in order or sequence that we wanted to determine. And there are certainly ways that you could introduce that into the command line interface. I think it's super, super smart that they broke it out of the command line interface and made it a sort of in-world command, that the blinking action. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think that's really smart. Anyway, we can talk about that more. I want to see what you guys want to talk about. Any drinks tonight in honor of Mostly Walking? And is Mostly Walking really moved to Wednesday? So no, I'm not drinking anything tonight. As you guys, if you've been around, might know, I typically don't drink things for play-by-play. I honestly don't drink that much outside of Mostly Walking, and it's harder to do it now because I have to drive home afterwards. So I do it less during Mostly Walking now anyway, which doesn't bother me a whole lot. I hope that that I can arrange sometimes to take the train or do something else, because it is fun to get a little bit drunk during Mostly Walking sometimes. But play by play, that's not really. I don't know. That's not really how I tend to conduct this. That's a little bit more boisterous than the tone that I like to set for this. So no, not drinking anything tonight. Also, oh man, it is. I'm working on dieting. I'm working on staying like in a good place and keeping track of my calories and all of that good stuff, which is going all right, but it's hard, and alcohol has more calories in it than I would like. Which means, I mean, that doesn't mean that I can't drink on Mondays, but it means that if I'm going to drink on Mondays, I have to plan well ahead for it. And depending on the Monday, I might just be kind of hungry all day and then drink and then go to bed kind of hungry, which is not my favorite thing, so I don't do it all the time. Anyway. Is Mostly Walking really moved to Wednesday? Officially, I don't think there's been an announcement. Unofficially, yeah, that's the plan. Officially, that could change because it's not official yet. But I'm pretty sure that it won't. I'm pretty sure that we'll do it on Wednesday. And I'm guessing that we'll just do it at our regular time just shift it over a couple of days. Not a question, but you seem to have forgotten you can move the endpoint as long as it's still outside using, I believe, F6. Yeah, Jetlag, I think you're right. And I had forgotten that. I had remembered that you could move the endpoint around, but I, for some reason, was thinking it was part of my inventory system, and it's actually a completely different system. Now, it does say it up on the top, so I probably should look at that UI every once in a while and remember some of the stuff that I can do, in the same way that I got stuck for a minute in the early part of tonight because I couldn't figure out how to close the notebook, and I'm pretty sure it literally says up at the top, press tab to open and close the notebook. Yeah, anyway, so I liked the launcher suggestion, which I got from chat. I don't remember who suggested that anymore. Sorry, but that was a good way to speed up my exit in that last mission. But I could have easily just moved the exit right over near the door, and that probably would have worked out a lot better. Anyway, good memory. Thank you for reminding me of that. We will see if in like a week and a half I am able to still remember that. But I mean, let's just take a moment to talk about cognitive overload, because this is a thing that games in general, I mean, always have to watch out for. And games like this, of this genre, have to look out for especially. And this is a game of its genre that is especially complex. And so cognitive overload is something that it is, it's at the point of acceptable losses, really. There's a ton of stuff that as a player you have to keep track of in order to play this game to its full extent. Just some of that is all of the programming, all of the commands that you need to do, the sequence in which you need to deploy your tools, how you need to set them up, but then also all of these sort of ancillary things that are around that aren't part of your deck, the notebook, and I don't even remember. I guess it's F3 and F4 are like for restarting the simulation. F6 is for setting the exit point, maybe. I don't know if there are other function keys that I can press. I don't know what they do. That's on top of sort of normal and even like not entirely standard first person controls like crouch and zoom, and then you've got blink, which is an entirely new sort of control. So there's like the things that you can do as an embodied creature within the game as a character it's a larger set of mechanics than, well, I don't know if it's strictly a larger set of mechanics. I think we're going to introduce weapons pretty soon, and then it's going to start to be like a really absurd level of mechanics. But it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that you sort of have to keep track of on top of in-game menu actions that opening up the notebook, that could be part of the pause menu, but the game doesn't really have a pause menu, so it's not. Also, Blendo has this aesthetic of things existing inside of the world, so understandably, but again, that's more stuff that I have to keep track of, that I have to sort of comprehend and understand as part of the world that I'm inhabiting. And then you've also got sort of all of the command line interface stuff that you have to sort of keep track of. So it's a lot. It's a cognitive load. And I think part of how the game deals with that is through its interface, by trying to make some of those things really present, and it's got an aesthetic where it can get away with printing like function key commands at the top of the screen. But then some of it is just you're gonna lose some of that information, and so what it's got to do is try to keep some of the most important things at the front of your mind, which it can do by like making inventory items, for example, and every time you want to switch inventory items, you basically see the whole list of inventory items that you have, and so it gives you an opportunity to consider all of those options, to give you in the command line interface lots of helpful options, where it will list out all of the commands that you can do, and every time you type something in, it will give you the proper syntax for it. So, it tries to be helpful. It's not, it is deliberately complex. Some of these things don't need to be embedded in the world, but they are. And that is putting additional load, deliberately putting additional cognitive load on the players. But it is not cruel. It is it's trying to be helpful. It's trying to help you remember all of this stuff, but it is also asking a lot of you. And part of how it gets away with that, I think, is this speedrun thing. Like, there's a lot of this that you can kind of cheese. Not the last mission, but the one before it, the second mission, was real easy for me to solve, as long as I didn't care about triggering the alarm. But it's there's the ability to perform with finesse, And in order to do that, you sort of need to have a better grasp on all of the mechanics, which is a good way to do it, because then players have the opportunity to become expert, but can actually play the game and progress through the game without doing that, or doing that to various degrees. All right, next question. How easy or hard do you think it would be for someone with no experience whatsoever in programming to play this game? It's a great question. I'm actually super interested in the answer to that question. So I've talked about my, secret research project that unofficial, let's call it unofficial research project, spec project that I'm working on. This is not a part of the research that my lab is currently conducting, but it is a project that I am working on in the spare time that I have, in hopes that it could become a real research project that could get funding. And it's a programming game. So I'm very interested in how non-programmers approach programming games that exist, the prior art that's out there. Especially because I feel like there's a real lack, there's a gap in the programming games that there are, some of which are fantastic sort of foundational procedural thinking sorts of training games that don't really get far enough into the realm of programming that I think they're helpful. I mean, not that they're not helpful, but they don't. There is a gap that they don't bridge. I'm thinking about one of my favorite games is Lightbot. I'm also thinking about like Factorio, and that kind of thing. I know less about Space Chem. Lightbot is a great example of a game, or like Robo Rally, right? I think there are digital versions of that too. Like traditional programming board games, and Lightbot. Lightbot's great. It's a little procedural puzzle game where you have a robot and you give it commands that are essentially lines of code, but they're depicted visually as like icons. And it's got a very, very limited palette, very limited like set of commands that you can give it. You can move forward, you can turn, you can activate switches, and there's a puzzle in the form of a landscape, some terrain that you have to navigate around and switch on all of the switches, turn on all the lights. And you run up against constraints of how many of your command space, essentially. So you start off, you learn the basics of it, and then they introduce functions, and then you use functions to extend your command space so that you can do more complicated things that essentially they use partial loops to execute. It's a cute little thing. It's got like basic understanding of functions or function calls. It's got a basic idea of procedural thinking, of thinking in terms of a series of commands. But it doesn't take the leap to actually... well, here's the thing. Somebody plays Lightbot. They learn some basic programming concepts, but they don't necessarily know that they've learned programming concepts, and they certainly don't know how to apply those concepts in anything like a real life situation. So somebody plays Lightbot, and then they sit in front of Pico 8 or processing, like very simple introductory level programming environments, development environments, and they feel like it hasn't helped them. They don't feel like they're programmers. They don't know what to do. Then you've got a lot of games like TIS 100 or this game, Quadrilateral Cowboy, that I would argue are games for programmers more than they are games that teach programming, which is fine. There are a lot of programmers out there who like games, and there are a lot of gamers who have some facility for programming. And you don't need to be like a pro coder to enjoy TIS 100 or Quadrilateral Cowboy, especially Quadrilateral Cowboy. I feel like this game is really well designed. It's got a smooth learning curve in terms of puzzle design. The real problems with it, and I use problems only to sort of signify that somebody who is coming in without any prior knowledge is going to struggle. I think there's the cognitive load problem, and there's the how do I say this? The game draws on there's a word in language for like phrases that everybody knows for like a dialect. I can't think of there's a word that I'm trying to think of that I can't think of. Anyway, tip of my tongue. It uses essentially tropes from not necessarily computer programming, but pretty much computer programming in order to for like quality of life. So for example, using the up and down arrows, idioms. Thano, thank you. Idioms is exactly the word that I was looking for. So Quadrilateral Cowboy uses idioms from programming in order to make it easier for the player to play the game. Like, for example, using up and down arrows to scroll through commands in the history of the command line interface. That's something that anybody could do. And in fact, the game tells you pretty clearly and plainly how to do it. But it's something that a programmer who's used this sort of interface will do instinctively without thinking about it, which means that a player who doesn't have that history has to think about it, can still do it, but is going to have to think about it, which means that it's increasing the cognitive load that is already particularly high because of how complex the game is, and because of the sort of like range of commands that you're trying to remember anyway as you're interacting with the command line interface. Another one is semicolons. Semicolons are often used exactly the way that they're used in this game. So I don't even have to think about how do I string several commands together. I know I'm going to use semicolons. Even some of the language that's used, pitching. Like, I don't know that pitch is something that is a term that everybody could figure it out, and people generally have probably heard it and know essentially what it means or could figure out what it means very easily, but I don't know that it is like native to everybody the way that it is to me, because because of my experience with like 3D graphics, where we talk about pitch, and other specialized fields, technical fields, where pitch is a terminology that's like frequently used. For people who are not in technical fields, I don't know if that language is quite as natural. And so again, like, that adds to the cognitive load. So for me, like, some of the challenge of the game is optimizing my behavior, right? Looking for efficiencies. Part of the challenge of the game is just keeping track of everything that's going on. Even for me, with all of the advantages that I have, going into it. So somebody else coming into it, it's actually not the programming that I'm really worried about. Like, I feel like the programming is mostly pretty simple. And it's all puzzle oriented. So you could, I think that like the game teaches it pretty well, and somebody could come in and figure out how to do the programming. It's everything else. It's doing the programming on top of all of this other stuff. If you have to learn the sort of fundamentals of programming while you're learning this intensely complex game, that's a high barrier to entry. If you only have to learn the one, then it's much, much easier. And I think the game is geared towards and balanced towards and intended for people who are really only learning the one. Same, more obviously with TIS 100. What's the other one that I really like? Oh, Human Resource Machine, I love. So anyway, the game that I'm working on, Rover, part of the intention of it is to try to bridge this gap. To start off with something closer to Lightbot that is really easy for anybody to pick up regardless of what their prior experience is. And then over the course of the game to move people towards something like, well, frankly, like the early stages of Quadrilateral Cowboy, where you are literally typing in commands. Actually, I mean, not quite that. Not, I don't know that there are great... I guess something like TIS 100, except less arcane. Something where you are actually typing out code that executes, and you know what it's going to do, and it's simple. Like, it's not complicated code, but it's code that you are writing. And you end it, you feel like a programmer. You feel like you understand all of the... you feel like you understand what you're doing, and you could sit down with like a Pico 8 dev environment and make it do something. Because that's not actually a super high bar, but it's intimidating for people who don't have any experience and feel like programming is really hard and it's not something that they know how to do. Anyway, Rover, I'm hoping, is going to help bridge that gap. That is the explicit goal for it. Human Resource Machine, I think, also tries to do that, and it takes a very different approach to it, and I don't know if it succeeds or not, because I haven't had the opportunity to observe non-programmers playing these games. But I am super interested in that. So, if anybody out there considers themselves to be not a programmer, like decidedly not a programmer, if you have any interest in trying out Human Resource Machine or Quadrilateral Cowboy, and you feel like it's not just spoiled because you've watched me play some of it, I'd be super, super curious to hear what your impressions are. If you feel like it is a real steep learning curve at the beginning, or if you're able to progress through it easily, smoothly, and when you get to the end of it, do you feel like you know more about programming than you did at the beginning? Where do you feel like that learning occurred? I'm super interested in those sorts of things because, like I said, it's hard for me to tell as a programmer how much educational value these games have. My instinct is that a lot of them are really not designed for that, and they don't work particularly well as tools for non-programmers to learn how to program. But if anybody has insight into that, I'd love to hear it. Anyway, I've answered like 3 questions. There's like 10 more. Let me try to like burn through some. Thano asks, how do you feel about the sticky notes? Intimidated? I feel like there's... I mean, okay, so, like, really, I still don't understand them. I still don't understand what they're doing in the game. That was funny. That was a great stunt. That was a neat little prank. I enjoyed it immensely. I'm glad that you did it. It's neat that the game has the affordance that allows you to do it. It doesn't really feel like it belongs in this game. Like it still doesn't. And I'm still not sure what its intended use is. Because it doesn't seem like that's an intended use. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe the point is that like this is a very dry game, and it was important to create an outlet for people to just like be silly, and they could do it, so they did it. I don't know. It still seems weird to me. I thank you for being playful with it. It improves my enjoyment of the experience. But I'm still, from a design standpoint, I'm still not sure what they're for. Do you still think there's going to be a narrative relevance to the transitional scenes or to anything else in this game, and how relevant do you think they are or will be? Yeah, I think that there's already a narrative relevance of some sort. I feel like they are definitely building on one another. I mean, I cared more tonight than I ever have before about the transitional scene. And that is very simply because it was a peek into my character's life. My problem with the narrative of this game is that I literally can't tell the difference between any of the characters. Except, obviously, there's a difference between me and everybody who's not me. I can't tell the difference between any of those people, but none of them are me. And this is the first time that I feel like the game has gone out of its way to say, okay, this is who you are. And me, my character, the character that I'm playing, is really the only one that I have any sense of connection to. I still don't really know what she's about. I don't know why she's doing this. But I know that she's like crazy smart with an emphasis on crazy. Like she's a little bit out there. She's got this tiny studio apartment, pseudo loft studio apartment that is half full of electronics, a giant computer and hardware that she's tinkering on, and half full of chalkboards that she's writing code on. It's got like a tiny little cubby where she sleeps, and there's some guy there that I don't know, and so that's intriguing. Like, it makes me wonder, like, who is he? What is their relationship? Do they have one beyond sort of like just this scene? And if so, like, how does the fact that this living space has almost no living space in it affect their relationship? All of that stuff is interesting. I feel like, that's the kind of environmental narrative that Blendo is really good at providing. But this is the first time that I've felt any kind of connection to any of it, because this is the only character that I care even a little bit about. So I think that there is relevance in the sense that it is building. It is clearly, there's a sense that some of these scenes are more interesting or more important than others, and it is building up towards the more interesting ones. I still think, like, it's, yeah. I mean, my opinion hasn't changed. My guess is that the game is going for some kind of a long-term arc involving the characters that are in your gang, and I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it seems like it is trying really hard to make me care about them because it is so unsuccessful in its attempts to make me care about them, which makes me think that, it intends to leverage that somehow. How do you feel about the mechanic of saving your blink commands between attempts of levels? I kind of hate it. I mean, I kind of love it. Don't get me wrong. Let me say that. Let me start over. I love it because it makes the game easier. It makes the game... It reduces the need for keeping track. It's like one less thing that I have to keep track of. It made rerunning that last level several times so easy. I only had I didn't even have to pull out my monitor, right? I could just deploy my suitcase. I honestly could have set it up so that deploy was one of my blink commands, and then I wouldn't have even had to take out my deck. I could have just left it on the floor when I went through the magnet field. So I love that. I love that kind of convenience feature. I feel like it creates a really weird dynamic in a speedrunning game, in a game that is sort of so geared towards the idea of speedrunning, that it, is obviously tracking your time in several places and then giving you stats in comparison to your friends at the end of every mission. I don't know. I guess if you just sort of understand that that's a part of it, then you know that speedrunning is a combination of execution of the level and preparation for it. But it seems weird to me that in order to get a decent time, you have to play the level twice. And the first time, you're not trying to do anything. You're just preparing for your second run. That's a weird paradigm to me. That just seems like a really weird paradigm, and it seems weird that there's not anything that distinguishes this is how fast I did it cold versus this is how fast I did it with intense preparation. But maybe that's speedrunning. Maybe that's that's the scene. It's all intense preparation, and it's not necessarily in game. You're not gonna change the registry values of the game ahead of time, but it's a mistake to think that you're not preparing intensely. You're learning how to exploit the quirks of the game, and you're practicing those exploits to an incredible degree of performance proficiency. So maybe the fact that you go into the game and play a level in a preparatory mindset isn't that weird. I don't know, it just seems weird to me. Current question: easiness to play as a non-programmer. As a longtime programmer and sysadmin, I gotta say this game feels super intuitive watching. I felt very similarly with hack and slash. It's also very hard for me to understand whether non-programmers get them. Maybe people get stuck at, I don't know, semicolons or something. Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that for me too, there are a whole bunch of mechanics to these games. Hack and slash, I don't remember if I said hack and slash, but hack and slash is also definitely in that second category of games that I feel like are really, if not intentionally made for, then at least best appreciated by people who already have some degree of proficiency in programming. Again, that doesn't mean that non-programmers can't play them, but I don't know that they work as well if for non-programmers, and I don't know that they are effective in teaching you anything about programming. Maybe they are. And I would say that actually hack and slash is probably the closest to explicitly having that goal. Hack and slash is trying to do that. I just don't know that it does it very well. Quadrilateral is not trying to do that. I think it embraces more that it's a game for programmers. But I think it actually might do a better job of it ultimately than hack and slash did, which I would put down entirely to the production value. I mean, hack and slash, I talked about how that game felt rushed. I think that they did not have the kind of budget that they needed to create an experience like what they were going for in Quadrilateral Cowboy. I mean, not that that game had a huge budget, external budget, but it got a lot of time and love from Brendan Chung, and that's if you were to calculate out the value of that, that's expensive. So a lot of expense went into this game, in smoothing out the experience of it. Obviously, the game still got bugs, right? AAA game would have a QA process that would catch a lot of that shit, but the design of this game, the smoothness of the experience is pretty top notch. Anyway, yeah. Just like you say, because so much of this is intuitive to me because of my training, it's really hard to tell how somebody who doesn't have that training is going to approach it and how they're going to react to it and what kind of effect it's going to have on them long term. So I'd be really interested in doing that kind of research. I don't know how to go about actually taking on that kind of a project, but have you tried programming for fun by playing hackmud? I read last weekend, for the first time a little bit about hackmud, and it seems in some ways really cool and in some ways like super broken, by which I mean more sandboxy than I really particularly like most of the time, especially in a programming game. But I haven't tried it. I am super curious about it. I would like to try it out at some point. I am hoping that it continues to get some development. I think it's in early access, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's just released. But I think there are still updates. It's being actively updated. I'm hoping that it gets some more structural content, because it sounds like it could use that. Regardless, it's a really interesting premise. It's an interesting idea. I am definitely excited to try it out. I haven't yet. By the way, you match really well with your office space tonight, and it's extremely visually pleasing. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm making use of the giant red wall that is behind me, and breaking out this shirt. And cranking up the saturation on my camera, because I feel like that's a good thing to do. And then Thanos says, if you can exclusively wear this exact shirt for every PvP, that would be great. I'll take that under advisement. Thanks. Okay, I am... that's 9:45. That's a good time to call it. Thanks, guys. I love doing this. So, like I said, I'm going to be traveling on Thursday. There's no play-by-play on Thursday. Expect to hear an announcement that there will be a Mostly Walking on Wednesday, because that is the state of affairs that I expect. Yeah. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday. I'll see you guys again a week from Thursday. Maybe not. No promises. A week from Thursday is the kickoff of Indiecade. I don't know exactly where I'll be play-by-play time on Thursday. There's a good chance that I'll be doing Indiecade stuff. So I'll update you. I'll let you know. My expectation is that if I don't get to do a show next week, I will be doing a show at the regular time the week after that. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Happy Halloween. It's October. Happy October. And yeah, can't wait to do this again. See ya.